Collinsville was named after D.D. Collins, the first president of the village of Collinsville in 1830. The town, from its beginning, had only a gradual growth until the Vandalia Railroad was built in 1868, which soon contributed to the town's prosperity. Coal interests were soon developed and became an important factor in Collinsville business. The last president of the village of Collinsville was I.C. Moore, serving from 1870 until 1872. It was Moore's donations that helped the Enterprise Fire Company, the predecessor to the Collinsville Fire Department, to secure its first fire engine, a horse-drawn hand pumper which cost $700. In 1872, the village of Collinsville became the city of Collinsville with a population of 2,800. The Enterprise Fire Company No. 1 was chartered on Friday, February 3, 1872, as an all-volunteer department. The volunteer firefighters were men between the ages of 18 and 50. Membership was denied to anyone who drank to excess or used profane language. The volunteer tradition continued into Collinsville Fire Department's formation. Beginning in the 1960s, the city paid personnel who would drive the apparatus to fire scenes and meet volunteer firefighters. The department continued adding paid personnel from that point. However, volunteer firefighters continued serving the city until the 1980s. Today, the Collinsville Fire Department operates both Fire Station 1 on Clinton Street behind City Hall and the Northside Fire Station on Beltline Road. The fire station was given a Historic Landmark Award by Collinsville Progress in 1998 and named to the Inventory of Architecture before World War II in Madison County by the Illinois Historic Structures Survey in 1974. The City Hall and Fire Station were named to the National Register of Historic Places in 2004. Currently, the city employs 31 firefighters, of which 4 are captains and 8 are lieutenants. All firefighters are paramedics as well. This is to honor the Collinsville Fire Department's 140th anniversary and to all the brave men and women who have served our city.
My name is Marvin Brown. I retired as a captain in 1980 from the fire department.
My name is Dwayne Bales. I retired as a captain. I worked for the Collinsville Fire Department for 26 years, starting in 1976.
My name is John Nichols. I'm a retired assistant fire chief from Collinsville after 33 years of service. I started March 8, 1977 as a probationary firefighter.
My name is John Miller. I retired in 2004 as a captain with the Collinsville Fire Department. I gave about 30 and a half years. I began working for the fire department in June of 1973.
My name is Rick Welly. I'm the fire chief for the city of Edwardsville. I did my first 29 years with the city of Collinsville Fire Department. I actually began in 1981. Was hired September 22nd, 1981.
One of the volunteers come by there one time and asked me what was Johnny Nichols' dad. He was a volunteer. He asked me if I wanted to be on the fire department. I said, well, I'd like to try it, yeah.
I remember my first day. I walked in green as could be and scared as ever.
I didn't know what was going on. Back then, there wasn't a whole lot of instruction or guidelines or anything. It was, here you are, you may not even, that shift may not have even known that you were coming on.
They sent us up to U of I. We were the second group of hirees, Rich Davis and I, that were sent to U of I for the recruit training school, which at that time was a 5-week school. And it was very good training, a lot of hands-on. Like, we raised more ladders in 2 days than I've raised in 33 years on the job. It was very good training.
My first day, I walked in the back of the firehouse and I said, what am I supposed to do? And one of the guys said, see that big red thing over there? He says, if the whistle blows, get on it.
It was actually just Captain Vogt saying, if that big red thing goes out the door, make sure you're on it. First day, that was pretty much my training.
I vaguely remember a fire that was very early in my career. It was a mobile home on Beadler Avenue, which was just west of the firehouse a little bit. I crawled in with a booster hose because that's all we used back then, and someone had opened the back door and the ceiling flashed on me. And as I was crawling backwards to get out of the building, my feet hit the door, and Captain Brown and I think it was Dave Barton grabbed a foot apiece and pulled me out into the front yard. It was a very scary experience for me, and for a long time I had a problem fighting fire until I overcame that first experience of what they call the Red Monster. So.
My first fire call I remember very distinctly was with Brownie and another person, John Miller. And we went out on a run of a wheat fire just up Vandalia here. And I stood there and watched. I didn't know what to do. Finally, Brownie says, here, I want you to put out the birdhouse. And that was my first house fire, a birdhouse. I'll never forget it. I got to use the hose.
The first fire we had was on North Crown. Actually, the kids were playing matches during the day, and Captain went out and talked to them. And later that night, about 8:30, they'd set their bedroom on fire.
But I do remember the Fairmont Hotel fire. Well, there's a lot of them, but that one there, which is the vacant lot of the library now, parking lot. And we had a couple of guys get injured there when the building collapsed, but another person and I were up on the roof doing some ventilation. I was scared to death, and I know we got down and 5 minutes later the roof collapsed, and so that always left an impression on me.
I still carry a little coin in my pocket, actually, that was given to me by myself and Matt Sinkowitz, who helped out. It was a rather simple call, a 4-year-old girl that had broken her leg in an accident. And honestly, I can't remember much about the accident, but what I remember is this little coin. They came back and they were so thankful, and it was a St. Florian, the patron saint for firefighters, and it was just something that she wanted to do. So our mother brought her back and gave us these coins, and I still carry this, all worn out.
Captain Brown and I, we were only working 2 people at each station at the time. We had 4 firefighters on duty, and a call came in of smoke in the grandstand at Fairmont Racetrack. And at that time, you know, our water supply wasn't very good, and our trucks were, our equipment wasn't up to standards, and we pulled up to the hill on St. Louis Road, and the biggest, largest black smoke thermal column coming out of the racetrack that I'd ever seen. And, you know, it was quite an experience because it was a rather large fire, and we lost the entire grandstand. So,
worst call happened just a block away, where a young boy had broken away from his grandmother following a school picnic at Webster School right next door. And she was still looking for him because he literally broke away and started running toward home, which she didn't know. He tripped when he got to Church Street and fell out into the street and was actually run over. So we didn't have an ID on him. The difficult part, and what's very emotional about it, I'm sorry, It's been at least 15 years, and it still gets to you, but trying to find his ID, and I had a son of the same age back at home, and that makes it very difficult.
We made a call to a residence on South Clinton. In a bitter snowstorm, there was about 10, 12 inches of snow on the ground. And we got to the end of our district and found that the trailer, the mobile home that we were looking for, was actually out of our district. But it just happened to be a young woman, pregnant, getting ready to deliver a baby. And so my partner, Jim Bone, and I decided we would go on and make the call. We got into the residence, and the woman was definitely in labor and getting ready to give birth, and due to the situations outside and her condition, we decided to stay there and deliver the baby in the trailer. And what was really unique about that is her husband tried to go out and start the car to take her to the hospital. And this was before Anderson was open, so the closest hospital was Memorial in Belleville. And he couldn't get his car started, that's why he called EMS. We delivered the baby. Her name was Bonnie Jean Yount. I still remember that. And the young mother said, "Gee, you did that quite well." She said, "How many babies have you delivered?" And I said, "Counting this one?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "1." But it was really unique because when we got ready to leave, her husband went out, turned the key, and his truck started. It took us about 35 to 40 minutes to get to Memorial because of the snow. He would have been stranded somewhere on the side of the road with his wife. It was quite an experience.
Back then they were all stick shift, all gasoline engine. They were up to date for that time period. A few years after I came on, then we started getting automatics because people wouldn't tear the clutch up then. Came up with diesel engines. Things got more progressive after that, and so we did our hose lays differently. We started using 1.5-inch and bigger hose lines instead of fighting fires with booster lines.
First fire trucks that were here, there was an old mechanical ladder truck that I wouldn't send a trained chimpanzee up for fear of its safety. And I can still remember being told that I had to string a flagpole for Webster School off of this thing and in the wind, and it was probably the most wild ride I ever had in my life trying to hold on to that. So we had that, and we had an old what we called a tanker. It was a 1,000-gallon tank, just a pumper. And that's actually what I had to take my road test on to get my driver's license, a Class B license, to be able to drive the fire truck. And nobody told me, again, I was green, nobody told me it'd be probably pretty important to go ahead and dump the water out of it so that you weren't carrying quite all that much weight. 8,000 pounds plus of water on that makes a big difference. This particular truck was old and worn out, and it neither had the power to get it going, nor did it have the brakes to stop it. When I went down to La Salle Village to test on this thing, had a real problem in trying to get turned out on the roadway because there was a little hill, a little ramp getting out. And because it was so heavy, it didn't have the power to come to a dead stop and go and turn out. But at the same time, because it didn't have the power, it would die because it was a stick shift. And I was very familiar with driving it, but still, it just didn't have the power. It would die, and well, then it didn't have the brakes to hold it, and then we'd start rolling backwards with no control. I remember after failing a couple attempts, the tester finally said, "You've got one more try at this." So I just smiled. I said, "Okay," and I just didn't stop at the stop sign. I just went right on through because I knew that was the only way. I said he's going to fail me one way or the other. Well, he managed me to give me my license and and move on.
I don't know if I ought to mention his name though, but this guy was a good ambulance driver. He worked with me, but if somebody was sick he got sick. If they was rolling up, he was behind a tree trying to do the same thing. And but he was the best driver there was. He was really good. I gotta say, and not just trying to get points with the mayor, but John and I worked together for, like I told you, for 10 years, and he was one of the best. He's really a good firefighter.
The person that there's a couple people I really enjoyed. John Nichols, which you're going to interview next. I've always had the highest regard for him. I thought he was one that I was glad that he was covering my back or I was covering his back, even though we weren't on the same shift. I always knew that I could rely upon him. There's several good ones. There's always characters. Basically, every fireman is a character in some way or another. You always knew that if you screwed up something, that you were going to find a part of that screw up in your locker. It was always a reminder. Always said that communication from shift to shift was not real good unless you screwed up and did something, and then everybody knew that. Everybody was a character in some way or another, but you always knew that when it came down to the time when it's serious, that people were going to do their job.
Near and dear to me, my best friend for years was Ronnie Witt. We lost him not long after he retired. He died in a motorcycle accident. But Ronnie, he was just a character. He was, I can still remember a classic Ronnie Witt story where we had a director of EMS at Anderson Hospital prior to the current director. It was many years ago, and we were still running as basics as opposed to full paramedic services. And this particular EMS director was trying to push us in the direction of going to paramedic. And so we happened to have, unfortunately, a very serious case. It was a heart attack, and we were doing what basics did and delivered the patient. And the doctor took delivery of the patient and was starting some initial things at the hospital. And he just looked at Ronnie, the more senior member on the team, obviously, and said, "Now, if you guys were medics, you'd already have this done for me." And in true Ronnie Witt character, he just smiled real big. He said, "If we were doctors, we wouldn't need you at all." And he turned around and walked off. I don't know if I laughed any harder than the day. It was a very windy day, summer day. I mean, the wind was just howling. And we had already done everything at the hospital. We were packing up, and he realized, boy, this is so windy. As we were trying to put the sheet on the cot, it was just acting like a sail. And he got the brilliant idea with the cot fully up, right, high as if it were going to be loaded. And he just knelt up on the cot. And he held that sheet up high, let the wind catch it, and he sailboarded all the way across the parking lot. I mean, you do that today, and you just, obviously, you can't do that type of thing. He took risks, though, that I could go on literally for hours on Ronnie Witt stories, because when I retired, I said all of my best stories always start with Ronnie and I.
Back in the early days here, when we only had 5 guys on a shift, you're very tight with your shift and that. And I spent probably, I think about 20 years out of my 33, I spent with Lieutenant Ron McDonald. And he was just a really good guy to work with. And we each knew our job, and each knew that we would do our job. So, it's just like working with your best friend as opposed to him being your boss.
Probably the best character that we had in the fire department was a gentleman by the name of Ronnie Witt. Ronnie was a person of my age. We were in the military, both in the military, so we shared that experience. But Ronnie's wit was just, and no pun on his name, but he was a jokester, and unfortunately, he taught me how to make biscuits and gravy, And to this day, I still make a pretty good batch of biscuits and gravy. But unfortunately, Ronnie liked motorcycles. And I was on an ambulance call one day and to a motorcycle accident, and got to the call. The young man was laying face down in the curb, blood all over, and we rolled him to get him onto a backboard, and I wiped the blood out of his face, and it was Ronnie. And he looked at me. He said, "Johnny, don't let me die." Well, Ronnie made it through that experience, but he went through several surgeries, he came back to work, and then he retired. And it was about a year after he retired, less than a block away from where his original accident was, he had another motorcycle accident that took his life. And he was a good guy.
There's a brotherhood within the fire service, and it doesn't have to be just here at Collinsville. If you're a firefighter, there's a brotherhood. It's been several years ago, and it's not just that time, but every time. Whenever a firefighter is killed on duty, there are people from all over the United States, as far as Alaska, Hawaii, come to be a part of that ceremony.
The fire service is extremely rare in the fact that it is truly a brotherhood. And it's not just in the local fire department, it's nationwide, it's countrywide, universe-wide. And I was back in my hometown in Akron, Ohio, and I was looking for a hotel to go to a high school reunion, and I had the International Association of Firefighters decal on my car, and I guess with the out-of-state license plates, and it was very obvious I was lost. And a fire department squad came up next to me and rolled his window down and says, "Hey brother, it looks like you're lost. What are you looking for?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking for the Holiday Inn, Crown whatever it was." And he says, "Follow me." So he pulled in front of me, took me right underneath the front awning and said, "See ya." So, you know, the brotherhood is universal, but you learn to work with those that are in your local fire department, and they truly are family members. You live with them, especially in our case, every fourth day you were with your second family, which was here at the firehouse.
I was lucky. I knew that's what I wanted to do from the time I was probably 10 years old, and got to live my boyhood dream. So it wasn't like a job, it was just what you wanted to do your whole life.
I've had the honor of serving Collinsville as both a firefighter and the city's mayor, so I know the challenges and rewards of a life of public service. Being a firefighter has both extreme challenges and rewards beyond measure. As you've just heard, all entered into the fire service for different reasons and in different ways, but all found it to be a calling, a call that they answered, unknowing at first how difficult it would be or the sacrifices they would have to make. Some entered the fire service knowing that it was what they had always wanted to do, second or even third generation firefighters, while others simply needed a job. All retired from the fire department having served 20 or 30 years. Some are still working in the fire service as instructors. This dedication to the profession and their fellow firefighters, not to mention the public they pledge to serve, is what sets firefighters apart. The Collinsville Fire Department has a rich tradition of serving our city, built by courageous individuals ready to run into a burning building when all others are running out. Today, the city of Collinsville employs 31 firefighters, all of whom are paramedics. This is to honor Collinsville firefighters past and present for their sacrifice and their service. We thank you, we appreciate you, and here's to the next 140 years.